What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle alongside our man breaking down the X's and O's. That's Jay Arnold, former Texas A&M defensive tackle. Jay, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, just still recovering from an awesome trip to Morgantown.
Yeah, let's start with that. I know you had a little send Jay away fundraiser thing here and got to go to Morgantown. What was that whole experience like?
Yeah, it was a blast. I mean, so this just started with I looked at Texas A&M's schedule and saw their bye week and ran a Twitter poll and had the internet basically send me to a random game, and West Virginia against Baylor was the one that won out, and so I flew up to Pittsburgh, and then got a rental car and drove down to Morgantown to watch Baylor play in at West Virginia on a Thursday night.
I mean, I saw pictures. You were like seeing the locker room. Like what all did you get to see? What all did you get to experience while you were up there?
Yeah, I got a little mini tour of the football facilities. Got to see just kind of the weight room, the cafeteria, and then some other behind the scenes stuff. Thanks to my buddy Brett, who works up there at West Virginia. And then I got to on the actual game day on Thursday. West Virginia has this little tram system called the PRT. It stands for Personal Rapid Transit.
Hmm.
So if you're not familiar with the West Virginia campus, it's divided up into the Evansdale and the downtown campuses, and that little tram kind of gets you between the two. So we got in there on Thursday and rode that around, and that was kind of funny. And then the Blue Lot, which is the main tailgating spot for West Virginia, just north of Millen Pusker Stadium, is literally a hospital lot. So for the Thursday kick, they didn't open it until 2 hours before kickoff. Obviously, there was still tailgating going on around campus. You just couldn't park in that lot. But I tell you what, whenever we got to 5 o'clock and it was 2 hours within game time, that place filled in and it was packed with tailgates. Got some moonshine, some pepperoni rolls, got the full West Virginia experience. I had a blast, and my voice is still not recovered from singing country roads.
That's awesome. Did you set any couches on fire?
I did not set any couches on fire, but there were a couple shoeys.
There you go. There you go. Well, let's get into a little bit of A&M. I know last week we broke down what kind of happened in that loss at Alabama, and we started grading A&M's performances midseason. We'll get into a little bit of that, but it was A&M's open week this week. You were a former player, so let's kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on what open week is like. Is this something as a player that you're looking forward to kind of get a little bit of a break? Or is it something like you're going back to fall camp and you're dreading it? What was open week like for you as a player?
Yeah, I think open week it's not like a fall camp where you dread it. It's really a chance to reset, kind of look back at the season so far, and then get mentally ready for the next few games. I mean, it depends on when your bye week is too, whether it's in the middle of the season, towards the end, or at the beginning. With this bye week, it's more smack dab in the middle for Texas A&M. But I think it's a much needed kind of mental break. It's not as like you're still going to be practicing hard, but it's not as much of a mental grind. It's also a chance for some of the guys who are injured to kind of take a step back and maybe focus on PT and stuff like that to get ready for the next week, more than some games give it a chance. But yeah, I would say it's definitely more of a break than a look back at fall camp.
Coaches typically and players, the kind of coach speak cliche answer about what do you do in bye week is it's getting back to the fundamentals. Is that typically kind of what it is, that you might kind of work a little bit on those fundamentals, those little more individualist type things throughout a little bit of the bye week that you might not have the opportunity to do during the week? Or does it resemble more of game week practice 2 weeks in a row?
So I mean, you get a little bit of fundamental work, but really the way we kind of took bye week is you look at stuff on film, you find out where your mistakes are, and you address those in practice. And then also there's game prep for the next game.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit of both. But really, I think it's important uh, set of practices to really address some of the failures that you've experienced. So if I'm Texas A&M, I'm really focusing on not a specific opponent, but I'm focusing on, communication with the offensive line where they've had issues. On the defensive side of the ball, I may be looking at some of the run concepts that A&M struggled with. So this is really a chance to address some of the things that you've put on tape that are bad and get some practice at dealing with those better, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. You mentioned players getting recovered. A&M right now is a team that has a lot of guys who are banged and bruised. If a guy is at all nicked up, banged, bruised, usually see him a little bit more limited in these bye week practices so they can get that kind of rest and recovery.
Yeah, you definitely see him get a little more limited. I mean, you don't have this is the only opportunity you get throughout the season to kind of rest someone. And that goes for practice and the game. The college football schedule is such a beating. I mean, even if you're playing a team that should be an easy win, there's still always the risk of an injury in a full speed situation. So your bye week is really the one chance that you get throughout the season to kind of give those injured guys a chance to really recover as much as they can. Otherwise, you're kind of limiting them in practice, but they still have to have some kind of physicality throughout the week. I'd say bye week is the one chance that they really get an opportunity to recover.
Jimbo Fisher mentioned today that not only did they game prep for South Carolina, who they play on Saturday, but they were able to do a little bit of future game prep as well. Is that typical of bye week and of the open week that you might look ahead a little bit, especially if you maybe have a unique offense and defense you're going with, and how as a player do you kind of balance multiple game preps maybe in the same week?
Yeah, so when I hear Jimbo say something like that, I'm thinking of it more as what I was talking about with the concepts that A&M may have struggled with, and some of the things that future opponents may do well, and that can be because you don't want to get into full game prep. You should only be game prepping for one opponent at a time. But if there are certain concepts that may apply to multiple games, you may focus on those a little bit more in order to get ready for the rest of the schedule, especially if it's something like if, there's a concept that South Carolina is running up front, which I haven't gotten into the film of them yet. That is also something that Ole Miss may have run or that Florida may have run. It may be a deal where you look at that concept a little more often in the bye week practices than you would normally.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, and this might be the most boring question of all time, or it might get something really great answer. But do you have a favorite open week memory? Is there something that sticks out to you when you think open week?
You know what? I really don't have anything from open week that I can think of that would be super exciting. I'm trying to think back to, if we watched any games during open week that were uh, something that would stick out, but I really don't have anything.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I
I'm
figured
sorry I
that
don't
was
have a
probably gonna
more
be the
fun
case,
answer.
but you are Jay Arnold. You never know. Y'all might have had like a Pinewood Derby during the open week when y'all had off of camp or practice or something. Let's get into grades. Last week, of course, if you go back and listen to last week's episode, we graded offense, defense, special teams, or Jay did on a pass fail scale. Today, we're going to look at coaching and overall, and then we'll look at some superlatives here from individual players. Let's start with coaching, Jay. I know you like this. Your favorite classes were pass fail. We're going to go pass fail. How do you grade coaching this season so far?
Well, when I look at what A&M has done this year, there's some times where it just feels like they got out schemed. Appalachian State is the obvious example. Mississippi State as well was just, Mississippi State was able to take advantage of A&M. The best schematic game from my standpoint was the loss to Alabama. So looking at that, I think you have to give the Texas A&M coaching staff a fail in this scenario. Mostly because, I mean, it's one thing going into this, if you would have told me that A&M was 500, I think I would have been okay with that. But the fashion that A&M ended up going 500 in with losses to App State, a one-sided loss to Mississippi State. I think that's not exactly what A&M fans had in mind. Obviously, Miami didn't end up being as good as we expected preseason. Then Arkansas has had their struggles as well. But, there's chance to improve. We'll see. The coaching staff, I think, has an opportunity coming out of this bye week with a few good matchups ahead of them. I really do think the most difficult part of the schedule is behind as far as Arkansas, Mississippi State, Alabama. But you still have a really tough matchup in Ole Miss, a Florida team who's decent, and then an Auburn team who may or may not be playing for their head coach. We'll see, and then LSU there at the end. But it's going to be interesting to see how the team reacts, and if the coaching staff can get back above that failing grade in the second half of the season.
I'm going to break this down a little bit more. I think everyone probably knows, and it's been well documented, that a lot of people aren't super happy with how Jimbo Fisher has called game on the offensive side of the ball. I think the one that is a little bit more maybe nuanced, I'm curious your take, is DJ Durkin and the defensive side of the ball. Let's cut out Jimbo's offense. How do you grade DJ Durkin in the first half?
I mean, I think it's part of the same issue. I think you have to give him a fail there. The Mississippi State game in particular was something that I was kind of disappointed in. Felt like we just repeated the same mistakes that we had from last year when we allowed Will Rogers to kind of throw the ball all over A&M. One of the things that me and you both agreed on was that the three-man front was not working. In hindsight, with maybe some of the issues with injury, McKinley Jackson in particular, it makes sense to have gotten away from the four-man front if you're not trusting the defensive tackle plays much. Obviously, having McKinley Jackson back, a lot more four-man front against Alabama. So I'm wondering if that was more of out of a necessity thing than a scheme thing. In which case, I'm willing to give him a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, but it's still, there's some issues going on with the defense that I mean, it's because I want to be fair too. The defense has kept A&M in games for the most part. I just think the standard was a little bit higher for DJ Durkin going into the season.
We talked about it a lot last week. It is that kind of that microcosm of the fact that A&M forces 4 turnovers against Alabama, but also gives 300 yards. It's hard to really get a good sway one way or the other when you do both of those things. So that being said, overall grade, how A&M's performance overall when you put in offense, defense, special teams, coaching, all the above, what's your grade for the Aggies at the midway point?
I think this is the easiest one. 500, 50% average, you just got to be a fail on a pass fail scale. So there's a lot of season left, and A&M, I still think, has the talent and the ability to close out the season strong. I mean, if A&M is able to run the table or even finish 8-4, I think it's a good season for the Aggies. But when you start the season 3-3, you kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball. So I think you have to give that first half of the season a fail.
Sure. So let's get into some superlatives. Who is your offensive MVP this year for the Aggies?
I think the offensive MVP is a pretty easy one. Devon Achane, him running the ball has just been a really important piece for this A&M offense. I don't know if you have anybody else in mind, but I think Devon Achane is the obvious choice for this one.
Yeah, I think he was mine as well when we kind of talked through this stuff on our podcast, because I mean, yeah, he's the reason why. Like if I was going to do the A through F scale, I gave the offense a D- only because of Devon Achane. He's 4th in the SEC in rushing yards per game. That's usually a pretty good place to be if you're a rusher in the SEC. Shifting gears, defensive MVP.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit tougher because I think there's a few people who have had really great performances in multiple games. Being a biased defensive lineman, I think I have to give my MVP to Fadil Diggs. uh, just because I think he's been the biggest pass rush threat for A&M. I think he was a huge factor in why they were in that game against Alabama, obviously forcing, I think, 2 of those turnovers. Uh, so yeah, if I had to pick one guy on the defense, I think I'd go with Fadil Diggs. Although, the way the linebacking core has kind of stepped up for A&M as well. I think Edgerrin Cooper stepping up has been a little bit better with Andre White going down, obviously with injury. He's another guy I'm looking at. And then in the back end, there's a few different guys. Damani Richardson has had some good plays. That fumble recovery and handoff against Arkansas may have been something that saved the season. We could be looking at A&M being 2-4. So he's another guy I think you have to give consideration for the defensive MVP.
Sure thing. Breakout player. Who's the guy who has maybe surprised you the most this season?
So if I'm looking at a guy that surprised me the most, I may have to go with Evan Stewart. I mean, I know that he's expected to do a lot of things coming in with the amount of hype he had, but I think he's still been the most productive member of this receiving core for Texas A&M. There's been some issues with drops on occasion. Those things are going to happen when you're a true freshman, but coming in and being one of the leading receivers on this team, I think is pretty much the definition of a breakout player.
Sure. And then we won't single out any individual player, but what's the unit that needs to step things up the most heading into the second half of the season?
I mean, I'd say the offense as a whole, but narrowing it down to position groups, I think the offensive line, a lot of the struggles can be traced back to their issues protecting the passer, and then they've gotten better at the run in the second half of this. I guess we'll call it the second quarter of the first half of the season. They've improved in the run game a little bit, but there's still some communication issues that have to be ironed out. Some stuff with protecting the passer, where obviously quarterbacks are getting pressured quite a bit. But that's my one unit that needs to improve the most.
So you talked about an 8-4 record being probably a pretty good step in the right direction for A&M for where they are right now at this point in the season. With 6 games left, do you think they reach 8-4, or do you think it's above or below that?
It's very tough, just because I don't know what kind of team we're going to get out of the bye week. I think the biggest positive here is that I would argue the two toughest, or the two, I don't want to say easiest, because no SEC game is truly easy, but when you look on paper, the two easiest matchups for Texas A&M are both the away games. They get all of the tougher matchups at home, which I think favors them. And then you also get UMass there, who, I mean, I really hope A&M beats UMass.
That would really be the storyline.
No offense to the Minutemen, but that would be a worse loss than App State for sure. But you look at the way it lines up. I mean, Ole Miss is going to be very tough to beat, but I think there's some vulnerabilities there. Auburn on the road is still going to be tough. I said, I think Florida and LSU are both going to be tough. So I mean, I think 8-4 is the ceiling. If we're being honest here, I don't see them running the table. I don't see them, going 9-3 after the start that they've had. I don't know which games are going to be those losses, just because the team, I feel like, has a tendency to kind of play up to the level of competition. But looking at this, I see 8-4 is the ceiling, and I mean, depending on how things go, it could get all the way down to 6-6 or 5-7 even. So yeah. Bowl eligibility is something that A&M has to get to.
Sure. Which of these final games do you have circled the most? Which one are you the most excited about?
I mean,
UMass doesn't count.
It has, yeah. I think it has to be Ole Miss is the most exciting one, just because there's a good chance, even if Ole Miss loses to LSU this upcoming weekend, which I'll be in Baton Rouge for that one, kind of excited for the Magnolia Bowl. But even if A&M even if Ole Miss does end up losing to LSU, they're still going to be top 15 team. So that's probably the most exciting matchup on the schedule. Obviously, Florida coming out of the East should be fun. And then you look down the schedule at LSU. There's always fireworks in that one, right? That matchup's been a little bit heated these past few years, so that one's hard not to get excited about.
Sure.
And then
So
your hated rival, South Carolina. I
the
mean,
bottom trophy.
the Bonham Trophy. Max Wright talked about it. You get fired up to play these guys for that trophy.
There you go. Well, speaking of South Carolina, I know you said you haven't delved into that film too much, but what do you like? What don't you like in that matchup so far?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I gotta say I'm a big fan of Shane Beamer as a coach. I think he's a fantastic motivator. I don't think South Carolina may have the talent level that some of the teams in the SEC maybe have, but I think Beamer does a great job of coaching his guys up and giving them a chance to win. That's a tough matchup for A&M on the road. We'll see. I mean, South Carolina is coming off a bye week as well, so they should be rested up theoretically. 4-2 record so far through the season. They're coming off a big win against Kentucky, and Beamer was a little bit excited after that game too, huh? With the sunglasses and the dancing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you look at South Carolina, they have a little bit more momentum coming into this one. The one thing I will say is that South Carolina struggled against the run a little bit. Arkansas was able to run the ball really well against them. Georgia, obviously, pillar to post. So we'll see what A&M is able to do. I think we have to see improvement out of the offense going into this one. This could be a pretty good litmus test for how the end of the season goes.
Yeah, and Spencer Rattler prone for some turnovers here and there, and A&M is prone to getting some turnovers, so could be a big factor in that game as well. Jay, we close it out this way as always. What's your pregame meal for South Carolina?
Yeah, so the Carolinas are also a part of the country that is known for their barbecue, right? I am probably going to go back to the whole hog here, but mustard-based sauces are more of the thing for South Carolina. And you know what? I might throw in some fried chicken as well, just because we're playing the Gamecocks.
There you go. There you go. He's Jay Arnold. He breaks down the X's and O's and the behind the scenes stuff of A&M and college football for us here at the Eagle. Be sure to follow him at jarnold85 on Twitter for all of his takes and all of his pregame musings as A&M travels to South Carolina. Jay, thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy it.
Of course, and thanks y'all for watching. We'll be back again next week with more from Jay. Thanks.